Hey everyone, welcome to episode 128 of the Ceres podcast, hosted by me, Stelios, the founder and director of Ceres. Today I am joined by Dan Nash, the founder of the creative agency SixEight. If you're on our mailing list, you'll be getting this month's offer code in your inbox probably in a couple of days now, but you'll also have one from last month. To join our mailing list, just see the show notes for the link. Sign up only takes a couple of minutes. And what you actually get is a few little news stories, what's new that we don't actually put anywhere else. They don't go on social media. They don't go on, whether it's Facebook or wherever. We don't really talk about it on the podcast either, because this is where we talk to guests. So if you do want the up-to-date news about Ceres, it's be on the mailing list. You get a couple, maybe 2 to 3 emails a month. That's if I'm motivated enough, but you do. And there's an offer in there as well. We've also launched a couple of new products recently on our online store. And we have some more to come. We are working hard at the moment. The warehouse is now up and running. We've got a bit of rebranding going on. And we've also added about 8 new articles over the last week or so. Some of them are recipes. Some of them are insights, industry insights. So, just go to our website and have a little nose around. Also, to see what we've been up to and how any of our solutions can help you, visit worldofceres.com and then /shop if you want to see the products that we do. Most of our orders are now shipped on the same day for next day delivery. So that is whether it's a pallet or parcel. For the most time, it is out on the same day. If you order on a Friday, we may keep it and then ship it on the Monday so you get it on the Tuesday. So, on to the episode with Dan Nash from the creative agency SixEight. Dan cuts through all the marketing jargon to put independent restaurants on the same path to success as a large restaurant chain. Chatting to Dan made me think how storytelling is really important for the small business, not just the large business. And I don't want to put it all here, what he said, but it gives you a lot of food for thought. I would like to apologise to Dan for actually being slow uploading this episode. Dan was so generous with his time, and we just got so swamped with projects on our end, and the podcast fell behind somewhat. Dan's aim is to get brands more sales in the short term and more love over the long term. Dan appreciates putting a story out there in such an open and public way that can be daunting but feels very uncomfortable, and taking risks is part and parcel of the job. One compelling thought I had after chatting to Dan is that any business can do what they want. You can't really do what you want without a story. It's how you engage with your customers in such a busy, loud social media environment. And Dan puts the story at the forefront of the business. And I found that really intriguing, because you can sometimes just fall into the trap of talking about features and benefits, whereas what's the story? And that's what Dan talks about. One last thing, if you ever have any feedback for me or the Ceres podcast or Ceres, you want to suggest a product we should do or people we should talk to on the podcast, then get in touch with me at stelios@worldofceres.com. I absolutely love talking to Dan. I hope you like this episode as much as I did. Dan, welcome to the Ceres podcast, mate.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, honestly, the pleasure's all mine. And for those that don't know you, you're from SixEight Agency, which is a marketing agency that focuses on storytelling. Well, that's your big thing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I'm different to other brand agencies because my mission in life is to help turn food brands into cult brands. And what that means is that through using the power of their story, and everyone has a powerful story, whether they believe it or not, to use that to turn the customers of food brands into this passionate tribe who stay with them for life. Because for me, that's how you make the world a better place and make money at the same time.
So we spoke on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and one of my biggest concerns was is that when I have people on the podcast from, let's say, a service-related background, so no physical product as such to sell, which isn't completely true with you, because your words become a physical product because they go on physical products, whether it's social media, packaging, whatever. But I always find it hard to dig deep and convey that. And do you sort of relate to that sort of state of thought?
I 100%. It's a challenge that I had, and as someone that loves communication and has read and studied a lot about it, and I've had business coaches over time as well, what I had beaten into me was, why would anyone care? And that's the question I asked, so I run a LinkedIn engagement group actually for hospitality people, and we have a few brand people there, and everyone that joins, I always say to them, you're just talking to other brand people. This is geeky stuff. Your customers do not care. So I've become obsessed on how to relate what I do and the value to that to other people. But it can be hard, but it's really because people need to understand either what you have is in relation to their problems. Otherwise, it's just kind of interesting brand stuff, and which is just nice and interesting, but doesn't move the needle.
So give us a little bit of backstory. How does Dan Nash get into this? Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, I'll give you. I'll give you the edited highlights. I'm going to fast forward to Thailand, where I was living for a few years, and I was trying and largely failing as a digital nomad. Okay. So before that, my background was in marketing for music. I used to be head of marketing for Napster, but I was a creative person doing very uncreative things, and it really starting to cause me pain. And being in Thailand, I was surrounded by these digital nomads who, it all sounds very sexy, but traveling the world, and they built earning great money and doing work that was exactly what they wanted to do. So they fit their life and their work around them. And that really inspired me. And my first love had always been foods and restaurants. But you always have that thing of making a leap. I mean, I'm sure how many people do we know who started a food business who spent 10 years they were waiting to do it because it's never the right time. So actually, just as a side note, an interesting exercise that I did for myself that's great for food people and a lot of people don't do is your own food story. Like, why did you get actually food specifically? So that was a really interesting exercise. I spoke to my parents about their grandparents, and it made me realise like all the reasons why I love food and my unique version of that as well. And actually, I think for me, I mean, my grandparents had a restaurant. I cook a lot as well. I'm an Asian food obsessive. And the book that changed it for me was Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, which I read at quite a young age. And that just blew my mind because I'd always loved food and restaurants. But suddenly you realise that the food on the plate is just one small part of the experience. And the rest is just so exciting. And so that ever since I read that, I'd go into a restaurant and always be trying to look behind the kitchen doors. And you kind of picture this gang of pirates working behind there. And it just massively increased my appreciation. But it was also the way he made it so exciting and thrilling. And it's still a big inspiration to me because I want to try and do that for the people that I work with as well.
Yeah. So one thing you talk about is turning sort of brands into relatable things, heroes, sort of get really big following, and that in some ways it seems intuitive or normal, like we all think that's what we all want. But how hard is it realistically? Because I run a business now for 11 years. I've been blogging, whether it's blogging, podcasting, videos. I try to put ourselves out there without being too reliant on me. And it's really hard to craft that message and turn it into sort of like a cult thing. And then if you give too much personality, then it feels like your personality, your personal personality takes over the business personality. So tell me a little bit about your thought process behind how you balance all these things.
Sure. So I think, well, the key thing is, of course, knowing what you want and having goals, because we're all too busy to have goals. And really, for me, there's two big questions that plague not just restaurant owners, but all business owners, which is, one, what the hell do I do next? What do I focus on next? And the second one is, how much do I invest in branding and marketing? And actually, by taking this focus, for me, it really helps to answer that question, because I flip the question from what the hell do I do next to how do I get more love from my customers? which for me is the essence of what hospitality is all about anyway. But if we look at all the brands that are getting the most love and growing the quickest and making the world a better place, they are obsessed with how they can get more love from their customers, which then goes on to the second question: where do I start? How much time? And I remember reading about a guy called Mark Ritson who called it the question because it plagues everyone. So he interviewed some of the top CMOs, to chief marketing officers in the world, and asked them how they approached it. And they all said pretty much 50-50, 50% brand, 50% marketing. So if you look at marketing as how do we get sales in the short term, and then the branding of how do we get more love from our customers over the long term. And I think that's a nice way to balance it.
For our listeners, could we define a brand? Because many people think a brand is the colour code and the logo. What else would you bundle into that?
Okay, so I love this question, and because it's an important question to answer, and I hate all this brand BS and jargon because it has to mean something. So the best definition that I've heard, and I'm ripping off a guy called Marty Neumeier, who is the brand guru, would recommend anyone to read his books. Even if you own a food business, to get your head around it, is a brand is people's gut feeling and perception of you, and that is based on not just on every touch point they have with you. So that means, which is why it's so important to be consistent. And I remember reading another Google stat that it takes 8 interactions before someone wants to buy from you. So it's what the whole importance of like everything. So it's not just your Instagram and your newsletter and your food, but it's the interiors and how your team talk to the customers and how your menu's written. And if you book on Resi, the automatic email you get, all those bits add up. And to any point, someone says, "This is how I feel about these guys."
And I guess all of those little interactions create a halo effect in some ways, or actually in some ways it could create the opposite effect. And I guess because for me, brands go deep, and I think I get what you mean. Like, and I look past just the color and the logo, and I think for me, it's like, if for example, all right, so for example, without knocking them too much, but if someone says to me, "Oh, Coca-Cola, they're great for the planet." They're great for the planet, and they help farmers, and they don't ruin the water in certain areas, and all of this, all the bad things that everyone says about Coca-Cola. I wouldn't think too much of it, but if someone said the opposite, it'd be a bit disjarring because you hear so much about that brand. Although they try and halo it up and they try and make it positive, there is also people that try and give it such a negative balance as well. But I think with brands, I think what I'm trying to get at is, the consistency that you refer to is actually really important, because that's when people say, well, actually, when I drink that drink, I don't feel those bad things. I feel like it isn't as bad as what people portray, or isn't as good as what people portray. And I think if something flows off message, like you said, for example, we ring up a restaurant, everything I've seen online is great, works perfectly, everything's ethical, and then I ring up the restaurant and they're a bit angry and stressed. That throws you off the brand a little bit somewhat, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's all on trust, and that's all it takes is one small thing to break the trust, which is why if you're going to put all that work into it, for me it's also a statement of intent, that it's just, if you want something to be good, you take everything seriously. I mean, one thing that really informed me with that was that I've been very fortunate I did a small project with Dishoom just a couple of months, a few years ago, and also worked with Flat Iron, and those are of course 2 brands who always hit the top brands, top restaurants, top places to work. And it was quite transformational for me and my approach was because they all have lines around the block, right? And who doesn't, whether it's a physical line or the virtual line when you drop something. And of course, it's a question everyone wants to know is, why the hell do these people have lines going around the block and we don't? And what I learned from them was this obsessional level of detail. Like every single aspect had been thought to death and thought again and made a system. And for me, it was a sum of all those parts. And some of it is on a subconscious level. And, some of it is not about, is this going to make us money or not? Like, it's, again, more of a statement of intent. Like, we just want to be the best at everything we do. And sometimes it's bigger than a spreadsheet or money. But then it then diffuses down into those various elements. So
if we look at those 2 great restaurants, restaurant groups, if you look at, for example, a lot of people would say, oh, it's all right for them. They've got a marketing budget. They've got, I don't know, a PR company and so on. That's why they're busy. But that's all on a superficial level. If those things that they're doing, that are obsessed about, if they don't work, it doesn't matter how good the PR is. It doesn't matter how good the marketing is. Nobody's going to keep going back, are they?
Yeah. And I'd say the two things that unite them as well is, and others, if you look at the most successful brands, is how unique is the experience? What do they offer that no one else can? Like Dishoom, no one else offers Indian food in that environment at that price. Flat Iron, the same. No one offers a steak at that price, at that quality, in that cool environment. And so number one is how unique it is. And the second part is how incredible the experience is, which is all the details come into it as well. And that is a kind of unifying thing. Look, of course, you can be a local Italian restaurant. You're not going to be the most innovational, but there's still elements that you want to be looking at. What can I offer that other Italian restaurants can't? And how can I make this experience dialed up to 11, even within my smaller frame?
Yeah. I think you're completely right. I think one of the things that I was thinking about when I was doing some prep for this is you hit the nail on the head pretty quickly. It was the word consistency. And unfortunately, a lot of people see that word as a bit boring. It's not a sexy word, is it? And the process itself isn't sexy. It's monotonous, going over the same thing time after time, making sure the staff scripts, the colleague scripts, are they perfect? Have they been adjusted? Always. And I think it's always these little things that, that people take for granted. And if you give them some thought, they actually can turn out really good.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I was thinking, for example, all of this effort goes into turning, let's say, franchises or groups or multiple outlets. But in your mind, can a single operator with a single outlet, can they do this? Can they turn their independent business, no matter how busy or quiet, can they turn that into a cult brand, let's say?
Absolutely, because even all the big guys generally started off as a small one. And I always think for most people, you'd be better off running your business account as a personal account, because that's what people go to social for. That's what people connect with, rather than, I call it the 90% of rather than just trying to communicate this kind of slightly bland corporate story that sounds like everyone else. The more you can see who's behind it and what they stand for. And interestingly, I was thinking about it recently, is if you look at the fast food chains, they you can say whatever you want about their product. Some people love it, others don't. But for independent, because there isn't that much to say, they put all their money into being very entertaining and all these memes and gifs. And you essentially, of course, it's sensible, because what else are you going to talk about? But actually, people go to independence. And one thing I really believe in is having your tribe of people, your number one customer that you stand for above all else. They want to go to you because exactly that you're not a fast food chain. They want to go to you because you are an independent and they want to support it. So don't make it hard for them to make that choice, because they want to know those things. So don't hide it, because that's actually, well, and this world we live in, I'm still, you seem like a young person, but back in my day, if you wanted to you express yourself through your brand choices, through your logo. Now that's not enough. You have to share it. So as well, you have to show the kind of person you are, and exactly by supporting those decisions. So if you can't help someone to make those choices and decisions, they'll go to someone else that can.
So in your mind, is that why the likes of Burger King and KFC, if we look at Twitter, for example, they're always poking fun and jokes rather than actually just saying, hey, look at this burger, it's great. I know that's a bit of a sad tweet, but in all fairness, they do always knock jokes out and having a bit of fun. And is that because, well, what else are they going to talk about? Because they're a corporation. 100%.
And it's smart as well, because again, it makes them look like they've got a personality. And even the sensible ones like KFC in the UK, they let the social media manager pretty much run it as like, hey, I'm the social media manager, this is what I'm into. And people will connect with that so much more. They're smart enough to get it. But I still think that there's a bit jarring, because if you look at it on Twitter, it's all kind of edgy, but then these aren't edgy brands. It just stops there. So that's the inconsistency, because that's the only place it lives. But I get it. It's what they need to do.
I saw a tweet the other day, and it said something like, "Are you up to speed with the whole Elon Musk buying Twitter thing?" Yeah. And I think it was KFC said something like, Elon Musk Elon Musk shouldn't have bought Twitter. For that money, he could have bought a pizza from Domino's. And I thought to myself, like, that is interesting that they're all having a bit of fun and then Domino's puts something underneath. And I don't know if that looks good or bad, but I think it's brave for them to try it because they are a corporation. So whatever you say, you know, it's interesting that they took that line. And McDonald's don't tend to take that line when you look at their social media feeds. I think they do play it safe a bit more. I think they don't hide behind the fact they're a big corporation, in my mind. But I think they tie themselves down with, oh, look, we work with local farmers and this and that. And I think they're more, let's say, trying to focus on that. We're a family-orientated restaurant as opposed to they are one, you know. So it's interesting. I think I get what your point is, that you've got to aim at your base. And I think most people forget that. You know, like if you supply Chinese takeaways. So, for example, if you're a British Twitter account or a British company, but you supply Chinese takeaways, then it wouldn't be offensive to use Chinese text or language, would it?
It can be these days. You have to.
To tread. Go on.
Well, this is a separate. As I said, I'm an Asian food obsessive. I have a lot of Asian food friends. It's just the danger of trying to tar all Asians. So you can do it, but there has to be a level of sensitivity. You know, rather than, let's say, you're a bunch of white people claiming the culture, which, to be honest, I've been schooled on this. So, yeah, and I've learned that you've got to be sensitive to that. If that makes sense, so it's quite a deep subject.
You know, I think my point was, say if you're a British, let's say, give you a specific example, Wingit. They're a British company that supply Chinese food.
Okay. Yeah.
So they are technically a Chinese company in Britain, aren't they? Yeah. So if they did a Chinese Mandarin written social media feed, I don't think anybody would be offended by that because that's their target audience. I think what I'm trying to get at is you don't always have to use the Queen's English. You can get down with your customer base, can't you? You know, regardless of which way it aims.
Well, that's because there's this assumption that you have to have all these skills and money to do it, where the irony is if you were just yourself, it's so much more relatable. And it's, even if it could be a bit boring, or you screw up, or you use huge paragraphs, one of my pet hates, but it just seems that there's a real person behind it. I
think one of the things I see, Dan, and I've been there, is because social media, if we look at social media specifically for a moment, because it evolves so fast, a lot of people spend a lot of time to figure out how can I get the best coverage on Instagram, or how can I get the best coverage on whatever, because the algorithm changes so much. So then it's like you'll go onto a site and it will say, oh, you need 100 characters, it needs to be this, you need a few emojis, but then that distracts from actually just the message you were going to put out there. And all of a sudden now you've started to try play this game to beat the algorithm. And actually, I just think to myself, you know what? If you posted 2 posts in that time to get some engagement, and one might have fell flat, but the other one succeeded. I think that's the problem. Are we looking at each, as business people, do we look at each tweet, each post as it's individual and say, oh my God, that one flatlined. Why did it flatline? Rather than actually just putting out the message, seeing how it goes. If it doesn't land well, put another one out a few days later that is similar, or, what do you think about that?
Well, all marketing is really constant trial and error and testing stuff out. But you need to make the time. If you're not making the time to know who you are, who your customers are, how you serve them in a way that no one else can, and do the framework for your story. Every month we all know what it's like to sit there staring at this template of like, well, what do I talk about next? And you don't have to pay someone like me a fortune. You can do the work. I hope I'm not putting myself out of work here, but even just taking half a day to think about those things, will give you so many more ideas, and will just make it that much more easier and enjoyable. And it's interesting as well, like, because I love personal branding as well, and I just talk to all these restaurant owners who are just terrified of just telling this honest story and being themselves, and they just think they have to copy what everyone else does, even though everyone else isn't really, from their comms, are generally pretty dull and not getting huge results. And and I get it. It's this human thing of putting yourself out there or taking a risk and thinking this catastrophic. But if I just do this, and everyone's going to unfollow me. Where the irony is actually, people will love you more. And it's just, for me, there's nothing scarier than launching a restaurant. So I just find it funny, or launching a food business. And it's just, you've got over so much of yourself to do that, but now you've got this sort of this story that lives in your head that you shouldn't be able to talk about maybe slightly more open or uncomfortable things, if that makes sense.
I think it does. And I think what, let's say anyone over 35 years old, probably who's starting a business, whether it's food business or not, they probably remember the times when there wasn't social media. So, and then they're probably also not social media savvy, maybe. Some are, but I think for the most part, they weren't used to having a phone in their hand or constantly tweeting or Instagramming. So then they open a business and they don't realise how vital it is, because that's also the generation that would have just, gone to a local newspaper or a national newspaper and put an advert in. So, or a trade magazine. So now all of a sudden, you've gone from once a month strong advert or editorial to daily snippets of editorial, like 4, 5, 6 times a day. And how do you keep crafting that story? And I think, like you say, you need to sit back once a month with a calendar or diary, write down your goals for each product or service or whatever it is that you're doing, and say, well, maybe I'm wrong, and interject and tell me, no, here's how I do it. Because I think most people are scared to go about it. Where do they start? And for me, if I'm honest, my strategy is always I start with photos of my product. So, for example, if it's a product I've got, I take the photos, and then when I put the photos out, I then try and imagine what I'd say about them. That, but again, I think every business is different. Would you start from a different side? Would you start with the story, I guess?
Well, as I said, I'd make sure you have this framework, that everything is out your head in a document that can also be easily updated every quarter, every few months, because your story and the world changes so quickly. And otherwise, it's just this thing that lives in your head. So I would... First of all, there's a few fundamentals that you need to do and put into a document, I'd say, before you then go and start doing the monthly planning. And where that makes it easier is that when you do the monthly planning, you just refer back to bits from this document and you can just pull them out. And you're not just having to repeat the same thing again, like, our purpose is this and our values are that. Though, of course, you can mention it.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. So I was listening to a podcast earlier, and just by chance they started talking about storytelling of products, and they were talking about how the story needs to come before the product. So the product can't be the story, because otherwise you're just talking about product features and benefits, and that the story needs to sort of envelope everything. What's your thoughts behind that?
100%. So for me, I'm going to call it a brand strategy.
Yeah,
I'm going to explain what that means, because again, that's brand jargon. So if a brand is people's perceptions of you, the brand strategy is the guide to shaping those perceptions. And that everything that for me, that sits above marketing plan, it sits above business plan, and that really is why are we here, who are we serving, and how do we do it in a way that no one else can. And you've got to be able to clearly answer those questions first.
Yeah. Well, again, if you don't know why you exist, how do you tell people why you exist? And I think if you look at, again, if we look at the multinationals, they've got some good stories and they know how to portray them. And yes, we know that they're big and we know all of these things about them, but like you said, they're clever. They've figured out how to get through the noise. And I find that quite interesting, because if you think, again, it goes back to years ago, if someone opened a burger shop or a fish and chip shop or anything, you just open the door, and for the most part, customers just came through. Out of curiosity, they'll just pop their head in. Oh, it's burgers here. I'll have a burger. And then now, I don't think that exists as much as it used to. I think you do need social media to get your story out there. So, I think if people can just figure out their story, it just makes complete sense. Before opening the business, you have that confidence behind you. And yeah, there's no doubt that the product will be good, hopefully. But with that crafted story, whether it's on the packaging, whether it's the customer service team that's reading this off when they're serving the customer, it's all there, isn't it? It's all part of the customer journey, isn't it?
Yeah, and I felt, look, communications is my superpower. I could never run a restaurant. It's what I do well. So you could just throw, let's say, a client at me. I've done no research, and I could probably get in and start doing an okay job of doing the social media. But what I learned from just working with other clients in the beginning was because we haven't because everyone's so busy, especially in hospitality, to take the time to do this work, and you're always just furiously rushing forward, was that the work itself wasn't as good, and you're making it up every month, reinventing the wheel, and all these approvals and back and forth, and it's like anything. If you just take the time, it goes back to this idea of branding being 50% of your time, and just think, right, well, this is a bit more of a longer term thing, so we're just going to sit down and take the time to do this, because it will have these longer term benefits, and it will make that monthly planning just so much more, even dare I say, enjoyable, because you have something to refer it to, and it has a clear purpose. Like, I'm doing this because this is what I want it to do, not just, oh my God, I've got to talk about my fish batter today. Why am I doing that? What's the purpose?
Yeah, and I guess the worst thing you can do is post on social media just because you haven't for a few days. I think that is just that's tragic, because we always find that by generating content, hopefully for the most part evergreen content, you can keep resharing it, helping people, whether it's recipes, whether it's running a business advice, that helps. But I'm not being funny. If you're a fish and chip shop, takeaway, pub, whatever, you're not going to have evergreen content. So then why would they have a content creator if you're a pub? What would you possibly talk about? Well, today I was pulling a pint. It doesn't really, I'm not knocking anybody in that, but it sort of proves how difficult it is for those people to be generating content.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that. Another big believer on the fact that people shouldn't just live on social media as well, as in companies shouldn't just live on social media, because, again, Facebook changes the algorithm, Instagram changes the algorithm. All of a sudden, you've gone from, I don't know, talking to 1,000 people a day to, let's say, I don't know, for argument's sake, 200. Whereas if you had if you used social media as a funnel to get people to your website and then move them through whether it's a mailing list or your blog or newsfeed, whatever. I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong here. Would you think that's a good idea or a bad idea?
Of moving people to the mailing list.
Moving people to like your own website, your own home online, if you get what I mean.
So I'm a massive fan of this, because and this is something that really frustrates me. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Meta, the parent, the company, because I don't. From all the things that have come out recently, I don't think they want to make the world a better place. I think they want people to be slaves to this algorithm. And I hate it when I talk to hospitality owners or food business owners who just want to make great food and make the world a better place, but they feel like they're a slave to this algorithm. And if they don't post, then they're going to lose all their reach. And for me, that's not a life, and life shouldn't have to be like that. Email list is so underrated. I'm a massive fan, because you control that. Like, you have control. I can't remember the stats. I mean, like 10, 20 times more likely to sell off the back of it. So I think everyone as a quick should be obsessed about that email list. And then you don't, because there's no doubt Instagram, whether it dies or Instagram is radically different to how it was 5 years ago. It will be, if it's still around, will be radically different 5 years ago, 5 years in the future. TikTok, same. So you should really have something you control and put a lot of energy into it. And also, I think it's that thing of just, social media is very important, but don't be obsessed. It's just one channel.
Yeah,
I have a business coach, and he's full of great advice. And one of the things that he says is always, what's going to get me what I want as quickly as possible? Which a lot of this time is like, how am I going to get in front of people as fast as possible? And it could be ads. It could just be collabs, doing collabs with interesting people. It could be partnering, just someone who's going to get you in front of that audience as quickly as possible, especially it's getting harder with social media. And sometimes it's just thinking, right, let's just take a step back. What's going to get me there quickest? And just as I'm biased, but if you have a great story, it's that concept as well, that maybe people might just come to you as well, because you're offering this unique thing and you're communicating why it's unique and incredible, and you're doing that well. And you're doing it wherever you can, then suddenly people are more likely to come to you rather than you constantly fighting to push this message out.
I always think as well with social media is that I find that people spread themselves too thin. I've done this. I set up a company. Oh, you know what? I need a Twitter account. I need a Facebook account. I need whatever is available at the time. And you go on all 5, 6 of them. And you know what? You can't be consistent on all 5, 6 platforms. Now, it's different if you've got 5 or 6, 7 different members of staff and you all allocate them one account that they're all good at. Someone might be great at TikTok, someone might be great at Instagram and so on. I think that probably works. But for one person to be on all those social media platforms, and it's not a big organization, that's going to wipe you out. It is, I know Twitter's one of those things where people really value that direct conversation on Twitter. So if you're just doing a reshare from Instagram or something, and then someone comments on it and you don't get back to them, I feel like they feel like, well, you're not using Twitter for what it is, and you're never going to build a base there, are you?
No. I mean, the only thing I would say, and this is something I've learned the hard way, is they'll always, and this is just the pattern of social media over time, is a channel will come out. It's very easy to get organic reach for free.
Yeah.
Everyone wants it. They suddenly start monetizing it. All this, your reach falls off a cliff. All this energy you've put in, you start panicking because you've built your whole land on one thing you don't control. It's a challenging one. It's like with TikTok now, for better or worse, I 100% get why people wouldn't want to be on it. But right now, that is a much easier way to get in front of a lot of people for free, and it's not going to last forever. So that's and I know how overwhelmed people are. So I'm not flippantly just saying, well, just go and be on TikTok. What I would say is that if there is any way you can find or pay someone else, a virtual assistant, someone not huge amounts of money, because this is future-proofing yourself. So you need to, of course, do one thing and do it well. But if there is not, I think anytime there's a new channel, it's trying to free up that time so you can get involved a little bit to do it well.
One benefit is with the likes of Twitter, Instagram, all these is that the barrier to entry is quite low. You just need an Android phone or an iPhone, and you're ready to go, really. You just hopefully got some quirky content that people want to watch. But I guess if you're shy, that's never going to really happen either. I think AMAs are always good. People like those sort of things. It brings them closer to you. But again, I think in the food business, especially if you're a single outlet, people are juggling a million plates and they're thinking, where do I find the time to do all this? And, I'm doing my prep, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. So I do think, if you set some clear boundaries and then send it off to a team member, and I think that's the key thing, is having clear boundaries so you don't get any faux pas or anything. Because that would always, again, that would be off-brand and inconsistent, wouldn't it?
Yeah, totally. And you do, it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't have to be a huge... But to have that framework, I said, to get everything out of your head in a framework, and it just means that anyone else can then pick up and play and still do a good enough job with it. And quite often it just has to be good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. Because whether it's your team member will come and go, you're going to get really busy. You hire an agency, they do a bad job, and then you want to start again. No, you have this framework that constantly evolves with you, and that makes your life much easier.
I think one of the main things worth noting is that if you do make a mistake with social media, it is okay, because it's ephemeral, it moves. And I know not all social medias are ephemeral, stories are mostly ephemeral, they move within 24 hours. But all of social media is ephemeral by the fact that the timeline moves so fast that if something was to go wrong, it's been pushed down the list anyway, and you just restart in a few hours or the next day.
Yeah, and I mean, look, unless you're being racist or offensive...
Oh, that's always going to be difficult.
Yeah, but you've got to try... I mean, you've got to work quite hard to really do, a business-destroying... And you've got to just accept, again, none of this comes without being a bit uncomfortable and taking risks. That's to get anything in life. And this is just an extension of that. And I think what a lot of people don't realise as well, I'm a big fan of being transparent. That's a great thing of the story as well, is... That's how you tell a human story, even if you're a chain. I tend to work with chains who don't want to be chains, and you just share where you want to go, and just say, look, we want to be in every town, but we're just humans, and this is why it's hard, and we're gonna make mistakes on the way. So if you screw up, you just own it and just say, I screwed up, but I'm a human being. This is why. This is what I learned, and people will love you even more for doing that.
I'd like to think so, but we do live in a world where people easily cancelled, and we live in a world where, if we go back, let's say last generation, I was brought up in my dad's business, his fish and chip shops, and he always used to say to me, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion. That's gone out the window. Every business talks about everything now. And again, I'm not offended by it, but it's a difficult thing for me to comprehend. But many times you see businesses, or even small businesses, promoting their local councillor or their local MP, whereas years ago, that would have been a big no-no. Recently if we look, so that's on a small scale, but on a larger scale, you see Disney promoting, I can't remember what it was. It was this thing in America, the "Don't Say No" thing.
Yes, from the governor, the Florida governor.
And then it all becomes a big. When is it too much? If and it's good for them to be human and to talk about these issues. But are businesses overstepping the mark? When is it disingenuous? And I've always had an issue with. I won't really promote anything like BLM or anything like that on my business feeds or anything. I just don't think it's a place for business to be getting involved with those issues. Mm-hmm. So can it look disingenuous from the consumer's point of view if you're having a pride flag on your website? When are you really doing anything for gay pride? Am I? If I put a gay pride flag on the Ceres website, for argument's sake, it's just a flag. I'm not doing anything. So at what point does that become disingenuous?
Yeah. So I mean, look, the one side of that is that if you just talk about your product team and interiors in a very dry way, like everyone else does, you're not going to move the needle, right? So that's on one end of the extreme. On the other end of the extreme is this very outspoken, uncomfortable, crazy, whatever comes into my head, which works for some people. But I'd say it has to be what you're comfortable with. What I really try and recommend to people is, so one of my key beliefs is to be a great brand, you have to do things for your community to live your values and build a lifestyle around that. And that's how you build loyalty over the long term. And the key there is to do things. So it's important. That's why it's very important to do the groundwork on who you are and what you stand for. But then I always say, as I'm going through the work with clients, I always grill them. Well, okay, you want to be more transparent. Can you demonstrate that? How are you being more transparent? Oh, you're really innovative. How are you doing that? Or your purpose is to be zero waste, or sustainability is really important to us. So you have to be able to demonstrate that. And if you can, great. And one other thing I'd say to that as well is, as we know, the world has changed with social media, and it's all about attracting other humans. It's almost like dating, It's like, imagine you were going to date some chefs. You had all these dates lined up with chefs, and a bunch of them were just like, oh, this is our store opening times, and these are limited editions. No love. But if you had one that stood for something, like any date, we've all had dates where within 5 minutes this isn't going anywhere. You make your polite excuse. But when the sparks fly is when you just openly say, and you will attract those people. So that's the one thing, and it which again can feel counterintuitive to hospitality people. But the more you stand for what you believe in, the more you're going to attract the right people, and the ones you're going to repel aren't your people anyway. So it's you're going to get more love, but just hospitality people find that very uncomfortable. That concept that I'm going to have to turn people away, but that's just human. That's human nature. So why fight it?
I think that's one thing that was we sort of segued to where I wanted to go anyway, and I think. You cannot be everything to everyone, can you?
No.
And I think for me, that's really important. So, if you're a chicken business and all of a sudden you just say, you know what, I want to serve the vegans too. And I know that's a contentious issue anyway. Maybe they can do it okay, but you're going to start upsetting your core. And you may not even be pleasing the vegan crowd either that much, because you're still killing chickens, whatever you say. So now you've almost you've upset a portion of your core, which you've took so long to sort of, build up and cultivate. And then you then start to upset the vegans who weren't really coming in anyway. And you've shown a light on the fact that you kill chickens anyway. So I know that's one analogy, but do you see an issue sometimes where businesses, when they shouldn't be, try to please absolutely everybody?
Yeah, but I'd also say that and I've worked with a chicken business who has an incredible vegan sandwich. You could be leaving a lot of money on the table because you were too scared to make as long as you can link it back to your values, we just want to create incredible food for everyone. Well, then it makes sense. And another thing, so I did some customer research recently and just asking, what brands you like and admire. And I remember Honest and Vapiano came up because they said, what these guys did over COVID and the lockdown, we knew these are the good guys. And it's it's all telling a story builds loyalty, builds trust, which builds loyalty. So, and the more you give away, the more you just show that you're good people. People will also, your people, again, if you're attracting your people, there will be, once they know that you're one of the good guys, there will be so much more flexibility for that. And I know that, as I said, from customer research, that's why so many people don't make the time for this, and you don't have to get an expensive market research agencies, but talk to your customers and ask them like, hey, we're thinking about doing a vegan sandwich. Will you hate us? Or what would you like to see? Or talk to some vegans, like, how do you feel about a fried chicken? And listen to that language. Don't make everything, again, live in your head, like base it on at least a bit of reality.
Yeah, I guess that's the problem sometimes. In business, we start to talk for our customers instead of asking our customers. And I do think that's a real big issue sometimes. I deal with a lot of, restaurants, pubs, fish and chip shops and so on. And I'll say to them, have you considered this? Oh, my customers would hate it. Well, have you asked them? Oh, no, I just know they'd absolutely hate it.
Yeah,
and I'll be like...
yeah.
That's really interesting. And I think, are we then projecting ourselves on that? And so I don't want to do it. So I'm going to say that my customers would hate it. So that means I don't have to do it. And I feel like that's really what we're doing. But in your mind, I guess what you're saying is you don't have to do this big survey. It's just ask one question. That's it.
Yeah.
And get the answers and go from there.
Yeah, and make it fun. Like, this is the thing. The more interactive you make it, again, like, we're humans trying to do this thing. It's going to be hard. We want your feedback because it's for you. Just make it transparent, make it fun, show people you listen, share their ideas, listen back to that. I remember a while ago, actually for this fried chicken client, I set up an event called Chick Fest.
Nice.
And we did, that was just where we got some of our biggest, our most passionate fans and followers in. And we test out food on them, new ideas. We give them notes to write about. And for me, that's why one of the highest points of a brand is just bringing people together over this shared passion. Like, I love communities and tribe anyway, and for me that's what I love the most, is just getting a bunch of people together over this shared thing. And whilst doing it, then you can just start asking some questions. We had a handful of questions, and then it becomes a fun thing. You get information on your product, you learn about just generally, because you want to know as much about your customers as possible. So to talk about all the stuff for your story that you think, oh, again, that story in your head, oh, they'll never be interested in that. Well, actually, if you ask them, you might know. And I mean, even just sometimes, yeah, go on.
No, go on. I was going to say, so what I'm getting at here, what you're getting at, and if I'm right, you're almost treating customers like stakeholders.
Yeah, get them as involved as possible.
Yeah, and I guess that's really important, isn't it? Because a lot of people see their customers at an arm's length, and actually you're saying, no, we're all in this together as such. Is that right? Am I getting that wrong?
No, 100%. Like, it just there are so many benefits to doing it. Like, everyone wins. The customers feel more involved. They're getting more emotional connection. You get great feedback on what you're doing. Together, you build this thing. Like, for me, I love food development, and I always think food businesses don't talk about their development process enough. And I get it's hard because you're in a kitchen for 12 hours. You don't want, some guy's got to be there with their phone or you. But it's exciting. 7 out of 10 people watch cooking shows in the UK. And they're doing it for the food and how much for the actual people and personalities. Like, people just love this stuff. So I'm like, why hide it? And then you make it open and like, we're trying this out again. I know, sorry to keep repeating this, we're humans just trying out stuff and trying to be the best. That's why we always do development. But should we do this or should we do that? Or look at this failure, and just make it a really fun, interactive process as like one example of how you can make this a win-win.
One of my customers tried to get his customers more involved, and so on a Friday night, he said, whoever buys the fish and chips from his fish and chip shop throughout the week, post it on his social media page and he'll choose the nicest photo. And I said to him, why don't you do it again? He goes, Stell, it was horrific. I said, why? He goes, the photos were horrendous. Not of the product, just the photos, or like, and I don't mind this so much because I believe that all food is yours until it leaves the site. And then when it gets home, they're going to do whatever they want to it. They're going to put ketchup on their fries. They're going to it becomes their own, doesn't it? It was only yours until you made it. And he just said, he goes, I couldn't see that attached to my brand because the photos were so terrible. Now, he does particularly take good photos of his product. So for him to see those photos, he was just like, oh my God. And I think I've seen there was some restaurants where they say, oh, we ban photos in the restaurant because they were saying the shit light and all that. People then didn't get the real look of what that food was meant to look like. So in that specific example, what's your theory there?
So I would go completely the other way and I would own that and be like, we love you all. we're just, we're not going to recruit any of you as professional photographers anytime soon. Just like, just make a joke about it. And if you really care about the brand, then just put it on stories where it's not going to live again.
It's going to go in 24 hours.
Yeah. Or just hide it, do it as a carousel and hide it clever. And like, why we don't have our customers as like social media managers, or just, and like, you want to like say as well, like, thanks so much for doing this, but just make a joke and make fun around it rather than try anything like that. I said, I'm big on transparency. Don't hide it. Just how can I make actually come out looking better as a result of sharing this, which normally is, again, linking it back to something, a higher idea or something just fun.
One thing that I've noticed recently, Dan, and I don't know if you've seen it as well, but there's a lot of brands that try and put out this very aggressive social media message. And I guess it's to cut through the noise. Like, for example, I saw one brand recently in Leeds, and I don't know if you saw it. They basically made a joke about Madeleine McCann. And I thought it was it wasn't classy, obviously, as you can imagine. It doesn't matter what the joke is because it's not a joke. And they did it because they got into, they went, locally viral, and local papers picked it up and people got angry. But when I was reading the comments, I thought to myself, no one's talking about his burgers other than to say, I'm not eating there. But he does this, many people do this very controversial thing to try get through the noise. And they swear a lot on social media. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a prude, as you can tell. I swear naturally, we all do. I'm not swearing aggressively. And I think there is a difference there. If you get a leak at home and you say, for fuck's sake, like that, you're not, it's not this anger. But when you're making jokes about very sensitive national topics, like I'd never make a joke about Hillsborough. Why would you? Like, people died, but when you try and make a joke like that and then sell burgers off the back of it, that's not a very good brand message, is it really?
No, that's unacceptable. Yeah, I mean, I don't even have it needs explaining. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah. But what the weird thing is why people feel the need to do it constantly. They're not doing it on accident. They're doing it to try cut through the noise, aren't they?
Yeah, and for me, that's exactly like we were talking about before with the fast food brands doing their edge. It's controversy and edginess for the sake of it. But how much powerful, again, if you've done the work and you know what you stand for, if you relate that back to... let's move away from the Madeleine McCann thing, but like, if you are doing this controversy, is it something around something I feel passionate about, or around one of my values? Is it something around battery farming or around additives?
Yeah,
and
then you could swear for argument's sake.
Yeah, like F the supermarkets, or or just the bigger brands, or people putting loads of sugar and stuff. And then suddenly, again, people are going to feel strongly about this, but at least it feels like you're saying it and feeling strongly about it because it's again, you're an authentic brand is just standing up for things, or for me is being able to publicly say no to things on record because of your beliefs. And again, if you're an edgy, if your values, if you are an edgy brand, if you're rule breaking, then fine. Like, you can look at ways you can do that. But again, how are you breaking rules? How are you being edgy? How are you being innovative within your sphere? Like, always try and relate it back. So whenever people look at it, it's a bit almost, and going back to this thing of trying to do things for your community, it's a bit like, let's say, a soap detergent company doing a music festival. Like, yeah, great, we're doing a music festival, it'll be free, loads of people love it. That's got nothing to do with the soap detergent. They'd be better off doing another event. So it's very often trying to make these choices is trying to know like who you are and what you stand for, and then doing stuff around that rather than this random stuff. You think, well, everyone loves a music festival, so let's do that. Well, actually, why? Like, why? What's the point?
Yeah. So someone called Dan Nash. I said, Dan, I'm starting a business. Where do we start? What is it you're coming in with? What's the magic sauce that Dan Nash brings to the table? Because I think, again, we mentioned it earlier, when it comes to services, people are like, yeah, I want you. And then they're like, oh, so what's the special Dan Nash sauce?
So I said, for me, it is around telling the story. And for me, it all came from my first ever restaurant job, where I had no experience. I'd never used social media before. I had 3 months to launch a restaurant, and we ended up having people camping overnight for it. Wow. Which was, it nearly destroyed.
Yeah.
Which nearly destroyed me, the work. But that's because of everything we said. I just thought, people are going to pay me to use social media and communications, and there has to be a line of people waiting outside. Now, I can do it like everyone else and talk about the product team and interiors. That's not going to get me. That's not going to get me. So who are the people that tend to get results from social media? Just humans, individuals being themselves. So I told this very open and honest story. Again, like, we're launching a new restaurant in Baker Street, low footfall, we're shitting ourselves, having fun. I picked on KFC a bit, and it really worked. So that's informed me ever since then. That's the story part. But really what I learned is the first place to start is, I call it your brand substance, and that's your purpose, vision. Your purpose, so your why that's bigger than money. Your vision, where do you want to go? Where do you want to be 10 years from now? Which also is your guide to everything. Because either, again, to answer the question, what the hell do I do next? It's much easier to answer when you know where you want to go. Your mission, so that's the things you do every day to get to your vision. That's almost your manifesto, like, we only want to buy British, or we treat every customer like a friend. And then your values, which is just how you want to be perceived by the wider world and your customers. And that is the absolute fundamental building block of being an authentic brand. So that's the first place I would say that you start.
It sounds interesting, because a lot of people probably wouldn't have thought about that. They would just say, well, I'm a sandwich shop, and that's it. But actually going there and actually saying, we're actually afraid. We've spent a lot of money here, and we don't know if it's going to work. And I think that's quite intriguing. And then people probably think, well, I'm curious. I want to help them because, well, why not? And, I bet the chicken's nice too, or whatever it may be, the sandwich or so on. I think, do you follow Dodo Pizza on LinkedIn?
No, I don't. Should
so
I be?
He's got, well, yes and no. I guess what's amazing is the honesty. So you talk about honesty. These guys have an open book on everything. So they're a Russian chain, and I guess they try combat that, because forget about the recent issues with Russia, but I think everyone has a bit of a side eye when it comes to Russia, don't they? We always think of oligarchs and so on and so on. So they said early on, to combat that, we will be open book about everything. So you go on their website and it shows you their turnover for each site. You click on it, it shows you a camera in each site so you can see how clean they are. And I did a podcast with a guy from there about 2 years ago, I think, and he said there's nothing we don't show. He goes, we show our gross profits, we show our sales, we show everything. And I thought, whoa, and I did think to myself, this is crazy. Why would you do this? There's nothing's a secret, they said. They said, anyone that knows anything can find it all out anyway. So we'll just tell everyone everything. But I did actually think that there was that much information that actually you got bored looking and it just didn't matter anymore. And I did think to myself, where there's no secret anymore, you shine a light on it, it's just like, oh, it's boring now. It's only fun when it's a secret. So what I'm getting at is that their customers, they'll say, oh, it goes back to you saying, oh, we're afraid of doing this, or we're just, it's a big deal. They're like, oh, we're opening in Rome, and we're really worried because Rome is the home of pizza. And, our other site that was similar to this took £4,000 a week. And they just roll it out, and you're thinking, whoa, but that's also B2B. This isn't just B2C. They're really open and honest. And I just found it really incredibly strange. But it's their thing. It's their thing. They live by it,
Are they doing well?
Yes and no, I think. Well, they're growing. Russia is their biggest market. I think they've got over 300 pizza shops in Russia. So I think they're bigger than Domino's in Russia. But they've got multiple brands. They've got Dodo Pizza, some coffee brands, a doner kebab brand. And I think they're doing okay. No one's crying for them. But it's just refreshing seeing that, but scary at the same time, just being so open. If any of the brands you ever worked for said, oh, actually, no, tell people how much we took today. In turnover-wise. It just sounds a bit, that's probably a bridge too far,
Yeah, I mean, that's quite extreme, but I would happily take that and work with that over product team interiors, which I know I refer back to a lot, because it's still, at least you've got something to say, at least it's more interesting, at least it's standing out. I mean, we're here on a podcast talking about that now. It's we wouldn't be talking about them if it was just look at our crust from our time in
crusts.
Yeah. Yeah,
that never sounds great on it. It never sounds great, does it really? Look at our crust. No, I guess, and that's the other thing. I guess a lot of people in the food industry think what is sexy internally is going to be to the consumer, and it isn't. Because, I've seen it where someone's took a perfectly laid out food product, took a photo of it, and then think, oh, that's great. But then customers don't resonate to it. And I've said to them, because that's not how they eat it. They eat it with, they put all their sauce on it and all their stuff on it. And I think now, especially with social media photos, you do see photos that aren't perfect no more. Or at least they don't conform to the old perception of perfection, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I think that probably goes down to like your McDonald's is. Look at, even years ago, you'd never see an eaten or half-eaten burger with McDonald's. It was always that perfect image of the Big Mac, wasn't it? And now it's like, no, they do see it with a bit of lettuce out there. And, I think mess is the new normal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, especially with this rise of short-form video is the future. I mean, I don't know if it's 100% the future, because I think people will still want photos and words, but it's not going anywhere, and that's what it's all about. Like, if you want it to work, it's got to look real, not staged.
The downside with video, in my mind, is that you've got to be stationary to consume it, maybe. Whereas with photo, you can sort of consume it when you're pottering about and doing something. Audio, you can consume it whenever you're doing anything. But video, I do feel like you have to be stationary, like whether you're on the tube, in the back of a taxi, I guess, at home. Again, like, are we expecting every independent food restaurant to then be also video creators? That's the downside at the moment. It seems that way, doesn't it, at the moment?
It pains me to say it, because I'm a words guy. I don't love doing, I've done food photography classes. But I leave it to the professionals. I don't enjoy doing video. It's not going anywhere. And it's that same thing. It's a shame, because we're all here, your audience are here to just make the world a better place through food. They're not here. They didn't do this and go through all the hell they've been through to make videos, but it just is what it is. And if you can't do it, then get someone else to. Because again, and it depends on your audience as well, but the younger generations coming up, and younger generations, even up to people 30s, 40s. So you're cutting off that whole thing. So it's whatever it takes, I'd say, to get, whether it's to do it yourself or get someone to do it, you've got to take it seriously, unfortunately.
How can people really find out who their audience is? And why I ask that question is because people go into a business thinking they've identified their audience, but there is some businesses out there that actually find out pretty fast that their audience is different. How do you keep up with that?
So there's a few ways. I think we've talked about some of them, whether it's just doing events, doing an email survey, and then off the back of an email survey, just saying, because generally people who are answering that survey are going to pretty much be quite into you anyway and want to help. And the more you frame it, again, honest, like, we're doing this to be better and we can't do it without your help. And then say, we'll give you some free food. Do you fancy, if you're up for a 30-minute one-to-one call, and you'll be amazed how many people do that. Really simple hack. Go into Instagram, look at all your most passionate followers, look at what they're doing, go into your competitors, look at their most passionate, the ones commenting the most, and just look through their feeds and just see what they're into and what they're talking about. And then what you'll realise is, very often, is that, hey, they're people just like me, and they're into all this other stuff. And so I'd say either of those two, because look, ultimately every business is solving a problem, and it's putting people on a transformation, where they were before and where they were after. And you've got to know that emotional impact as well of where they are. Like, all food is emotion, and it's what are they feeling afterwards? Where's their pain before? And then it's like, hey, don't you hate when you're trying to book a restaurant and it's your one night out and it's awful, and people are like, yeah, I know that feeling. And like, don't you love when it's just you're on this, you get this thrilling, comforting, or whatever it is. So that's why it's also really important to know everything about the customers, what their pain points, their hopes, their dreams, their desires, and just stuff outside, as we said, the stuff outside of the day-to-day, like of your product. What else? Which very often, this is an easy one, just talk about food, as in, like, not just your food, but the world of food, because most people are just really into food, and people don't get, this is such a simple, like, again, I couldn't even call it a hack. If you don't know what to talk about and don't just want to keep banging on about the same things, as just talk about your favourite condiments, talk about your favourite supermarkets, favourite restaurants, give some recipes.
So we spoke about a few key things that are really interesting and important. One of the things that I take away from this is that, business or not, speak in the first person. try and remove that corporate image that you've tried so hard to craft. Because we'll think, I don't want to look small, so we try and make ourselves look big. But you're still, and one thing that I've took out of that is still speaking first person and try to talk to people like you would, because that's the way they want to hear your voice when they read it, I guess. Yeah. But what about for the people that are listening to this? Mm-hmm. We're an hour in, and they say, this sounds great, but it's not for me, or what I do is fine, thanks, or just I haven't got time for this. What message do you drive home to someone who's thinking like that?
In that whether you believe it or not, you have a unique story that not everyone's going to connect with, and the brands that grow the fastest are the ones that share that story, because no one can copy your story. And if you are successful, someone is going to copy you. That's guaranteed. But no one can copy that story and the love you get from that community. And also, once you have that love, when people know you're one of the good guys, that can open up all these new revenue streams as well. Like we've seen since COVID, anything from meal kits to food trucks to take-home products, the kind of deli operations. If you know your customers and if they're behind you, you can work with them. And then, because the world is changing very fast, and it gives you the opportunity to then, not effortlessly, but it will make launching new products and revenue streams much easier. And it's just what the younger people now want a brand that's have a why that's bigger than money. And if they want to share their choices to the world because it makes them look good and it's how they express themselves. So again, don't make it look hard, and let's just have those fast food chains in the back of your mind. Like, do you want to be like them? Is that what your customers are coming to you for? Or how about using all that stuff that is about you and your passions and turning that into your advantage? So look, there's plenty of people that can be like, this isn't, we're doing fine, thanks, this isn't for me, we don't have time. So all I'd say is just consider the benefits of what you're leaving on the table by not doing it.
I guess also we see how not just Gen Z, but the generation of people that, let's say from age 16 to 40, they're very ethically and morally motivated. So, if we use chicken, for example, if you're using battery hens and they figure this out and you've got a halo over your business because you're trying to portray that you're a good business, and they figure out that that's what you're doing, that will pee some people off. Now, if the likes of KFC do stuff like that, that's not a big deal because they weren't trying to portray that, were they? And because they are a national brand, well, they're a national brand. That's why I chose to go to the small business or the up-and-coming business. So businesses that are starting today probably do have an obligation to do good, don't they? If that makes sense.
Well, I think the world's not going in a great place. Like I personally think that all brands have an obligation to do, and it can be in a very small way, just for your customers, for your community. But I think that we do all have an obligation for that. And one other thing as well is just, they say on average it takes, for someone to be a loyal customer, it takes 3 visits. So, and how, for me, if that was me, I would want to be hitting them with the emotional kitchen sink, because again, you'll always have an emotional connection to food, especially if it's good or it does what you need to, but the connection you'll have to a human is 10x that. So when you put the great product next to this great story, that emotional connection, I remember another stat is that you're 4 times more likely to buy from someone that you emotionally connect with. So why make it harder for yourself?
So again, that makes sense. Don't write these, stories, social medias in a very ambiguous way. Put your name on it. Talk about it be in the first person mode. Don't hide behind it. I get it's stuff that, I guess, if you're someone that's maybe a little bit introverted, I could see how this would pain people, to some degree,
Oh, it's hard. It's hard. I have these conversations, and you can just see the reaction of people of like, oh, but then sometimes I also say, it's like, again, this comes back to your vision. I have to do it I do a lot of uncomfortable stuff. I have to close my eyes, think about where I want to get to, and just think,
yeah, and do it.
Which is, again, it's like running a food business is hard anyway. Like it's just another hard, uncomfortable thing.
I think everything you've also mentioned protects businesses from someone who thinks a brand is just what you've created visually, and then tries to open a similar thing in the same location or within, a 3-mile radius, let's say, and then next thing you know, they've got a similar look, similar product, but actually they were thinking only about the visual brand, the visual look, and the product, and actually they couldn't hit you on your local ethics, or, let's say, whereabouts are you based, Dan?
I'm in Margate.
Yeah, so let's say, for example, I've got a great customer in Margate, by the way, and if you say, for example,
I've got an idea what that is.
Yeah. So say, for example, you're in Margate and, you sponsor the local football team, or, you give food to the school, or, these little basic things, just extending food hospitality, to people that maybe can't afford it or don't have access to it or just can't get to you, whatever it may be. Those little nice things that all add up, those little joyous moments that spread the message. You can't just open up a restaurant or takeaway or whatever it may be and say, yep, I'm taking half his business, because you've built up some loyalty, like you said. You've built up empathy, you built up all these strings that maybe are invisible to someone who's just seen you sell chicken or chips or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, 100% that. And they can't copy. The more you're open about it, the harder it is to copy. And they'll just be copiers, whereas you're the innovator.
Yeah.
So
I guess if they then said, oh, we're going to donate X amount of food to X, people are going to be like, come on, mate, we see what you're doing here. But I guess if you do that also, if you are donating food or whatever it may be, whatever the good cause is, it's also being very careful how you go about promoting that. Because, I saw, especially over COVID, where food was just going everywhere, like, from food businesses. And sometimes people got the tone wrong. Like, it was like, we delivered food to X and look at us. And then I think people were a bit touchy. And yet other people just delivered it, didn't say anything. And maybe the people that received the product then promoted it. So you do have to be quite delicate and strike the balance quite well, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dan, is there anything I've missed that I should have brought up with you that I have been so bad at remembering?
No, I mean, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I think we covered, all starts with your substance, your purpose, mission, vision, and values. Really focus on who your number one audience is, how you serve them in a way that no one else can, and just think about elements of that story. I mean, I have a framework. We're probably running out of time, but I mean, I could share a few key points from that, or
go
just
for
some
it.
ideas, just to give some ideas.
Share a few just to end it on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So just a few ideas So this is my 5-step framework. I call it my minimum viable story framework. So this is how you just start generating a story that no one else does, even if you're short on time and resource. Share your journey. So that's where you've been. Like, how did it all come together? It's a lot of your why comes from that. That's also where your vision comes in. Share the vision you want, because people want to be inspired by the vision. Especially we all know how hard it is to recruit at the moment. And we've all been in survival mode with COVID as well. But people don't want to work with or buy from a company that's in survival mode. They want to buy from a company that's got an inspiring vision. So share and you can just be very. That's where you really start telling a human story. Share your beliefs, what you stand for and against, and it doesn't have to be, as we said, heavy political stuff. It can just be, I hate battery farming, or I just want to be more sustainable. Give inspirations and value. So just around what inspires you, and it should normally be very food related. So just talk about the wider world of food and why you do it and all the food stuff you love, and just that gives back, because most of your customers are running around like headless chickens, watching TV shows. They look to you as a leader, so be the leader and help them. And another one I like is just expertise, like show your expertise. And what I mean by that is not saying, oh, hey, we're the best, but just show what you're doing every day to try and be the best. So whether it's you listen to this podcast that inspired you, or your favorite book, or your mentor, or experiences that you had, because again, that all goes down to that food that you serve is going to be unique because of all that stuff that goes behind it. And the more people know that goes behind it, the more value they'll put behind it, the more that they know it's uniquely you, and it will affect the taste. It's the way human brains work.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we haven't mentioned in this whole thing, I think you briefly just touched on it somewhat, but it's actually, we're all talking about the sales generation or loyalty generation, but it's actually also hiring. People that work for people now, or companies, they want to feel like they're making a difference. So if you can hire someone easier or better, that's more loyal, more into it, because they feel like they're making change, because they believe in your 5-point ethos or your 3-point ethos, whatever it is, they believe in your master plan. Well, that was worth it too, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's a shit, because I spoke to so many food business owners post-COVID who were just broken. Totally fair enough. And I asked, it's a deliberately challenging question of where do you want to be in 10 years? And they just say, look, mate, to be honest, I just want to pay the bills, maybe open a few more stores. And I say, look, I totally feel your pain. This is, it's heartbreaking for me to listen to, but is that going to motivate you? Is that going to motivate your team? Is that going to motivate your customers? So I hope to inspire some of you, if you are still feeling like that, or you just haven't even had the time because you're moving so furiously, trying to push forward so much, is just take the time to think about that, because it's going to inspire you and all the people around you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think everyone should, anybody that's listening to this should really jump onto your website, because there's a lot of nice little snippets in the blog area, nice little, not overly long blogs, just really easy for people to read. I had a quick look earlier, and for those that are listening, and I'll put it in the intro anyway, it's SixEightAgency.com/blog. And it's just, again, nice little positive pointers pointing in the right direction. And I think, they're not dense, they're not heavy, they're just easy for people to just take in, aren't they?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks for that.
They're written very well, Dan. It must be because you know how to write.
I can give away my secret weapons for that if you'd like.
What's your secret weapons? Go on.
There were two things, which was because I used to be very wordy. Like I've got a lot to say, but the problem, what I learned is that, and I see this again with food business owners on Instagram, they do these huge paragraphs of text, and I'm just like, this isn't. I feel it, because I've got a lot to say as well, and I used to be the same, but people don't have much time. So number one, please break up your paragraphs. That's I beg of you, because you're wasting all that. Though if your people love you, they will still read it. That's the one thing, though. You can go long form. That's the thing. If you've got something to say and you build your tribe, better to do that than just a couple of lines of fluff. But Anne Handley, Everybody Writes, was a brilliant book for me, of really just cutting through the fluff and really like, what are you trying to say? Are you dressing it up with way too many words? And it's really just getting your head around how to just cut out all the unnecessary words, which is my favourite thing of using unnecessary words. And then I use a Hemingway app as well, which is a free app. And it will just, you put in your writing, you just copy and paste into it, and it will break down where you're using way too long sentences, unnecessary words. And just practicing that has made my writing so much tighter. So thank you. I'm really glad anyway, always nice to hear a compliment.
I use Grammarly because my grammar is absolutely terrible. I mean, diabolical, shocking. So if I didn't use that, nothing would get done right. I'm not actually sure that gets done right, to be fair. But no, Dan, absolutely, thank you so much for your time. It's been great. I love the way that, you're focused, you know what you're doing, you're sharing that gospel, you believe in the story. And I think, you're right. We all have a story. We may not think we do, but we do, and we need to push it out there. And I think you're so right. Thanks for your positivity, the forward thinkingness. Thanks for getting in touch. I think it's just brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, I really enjoyed it. So thanks for having me, Stelios.
All right, man. I'd love to have you on again in the future.
But would love that too.
Massive thank you to Dan Nash for joining me on the Ceres podcast. Once again, apologies for the delay. To follow Dan Nash, just head over to the show notes on the podcast player, and there's links there for Dan Nash and SixEight. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends on social media. If you like this episode, then I'm sure others in the industry may like it too. And again, to see what we've been up to and how any of our solutions can help you, visit worldofceres.com.